Help me welcome to the cinema, Julie Andrews.
Thank you all for coming tonight. I think it's lovely that you did.
I'll start with the, with a question.
Yes.
Julie, a big subject of the documentary is the artistic collaboration between you and Blake. How would you describe that?
I think it grew as the marriage grew. And we were married like 34 years, so that's quite a long time. And I think I understood him more and more. And first I was very admiring, but I think it was more something that occurred. And then he always asked me to read his scripts and things like that, but very seldom asked for advice in the sense of a movie, because he really knew what he wanted to show and do.
I'm going to ask you not picture and not filming, please. Yeah, you said once that you and I were talking that, and I think we agreed on it, that he was kind of a little underestimated.
I'm not sure, because when I finally met him, I certainly estimated, as many people did, after Tiffany's, Breakfast at Tiffany's. But maybe he was. I mean, it was like discovering this wonderful treasure trove of talent, and it depends what you wanted to watch one of his movies, for the reason you wanted to watch it, for comedy, for drama, because he really, including musicals, as you know, he did it all. And it always staggered me that he somehow, to me, it always seemed very easy. So I wasn't that sort of out of. I was mostly in awe. How did he know so much? And of course, he was influenced by so many great people. But he must have done in his youth, which I'd hoped that the documentary would show a little bit more. But he must have studied film like you don't believe, because his simplicity and the styles and the beauty that he created on his movies was so huge. And he loved describing things or making something happen. It was great fun when we did something together like Darling Lily, and the opening of Darling Lily, which we both felt was like we gave birth to a little baby that day, because we filmed it and filmed it and filmed it, and finally that was one take.
Yeah, it was a very difficult scene.
Very, very difficult. Yeah, but what a feeling of success when we'd finished it, and we went home that night and felt very smug, I guess.
Was he sharing when he was writing? Was he sharing the scripts, and when they were?
He asked me to read a lot, and I was very flattered about that. And he helped me a little bit too with some of our books. The first few that I wrote before Emma and I collaborated, but he just knew. I'm sorry, I'm going to digress for a moment. I wrote a story, or Emma and I wrote a story, and there was a big fight scene in medieval times in the book. And I said, Blake, I do not know how to write this scene, which is a children's book. Well, what is it, young adult? Middle grade, thank you. But I said, I don't know, can you give me any ideas? And about 10 seconds flat, he said, first of all, what you want. And I said, well, I want to know what a fight would consist of, and what you might write of in medieval times. And in about 5 seconds, I had the whole fight, scribbling like crazy on the page, and he did influence that enormously.
Can you describe the atmospheres on your set? I always love it because you're so knowledgeable about how the films are made, you know, and it just when you talk about the sets, is so
Well,
wonderful.
he always had a beautiful looking set too. There was something about the glow on a lot of, not just, I'm not talking about the comedies as much, but the, you know, Tiffany's, for instance, all of them had this, and particularly Victor Victoria had this wonderful decor of the hotel and everything. He seemed to just know, and that's what made him so endearing to me, because I couldn't figure how did he know all that, but he did. And it doesn't. It sounds simple, but it isn't. I mean, the choices and his setups and camera angles and things like that. I think anybody that knew him was impressed that way at his simplicity, lack of artifice, other than the comedies, which were so extended and funny. But if he was doing something quite serious, it was amazing to see what he created and came up with. Yeah.
You allowed to film in your homes. Your children were part of the work. I mean, it
Well,
was.
the documentary was sort of taken from some things that we did as a family or wanted, and some of it I think was probably from That's Life, which was filmed in our home. And what were you saying?
No, I said that the film you allowed the films to get very close to your life, and some of them are almost
Yes,
an
certainly in the later
autobiographic.
years we did. Yeah. I wish I could sum it all up for you in about a second, but when you marry a very charismatic gentleman, it's like I'm dazzled, and I always was, I think. And I'm not talking about the gushing type, but just appreciating what it took when he did do something really quite wonderful.
He brought something to your career as well. He brought he brought a little twist in it.
Yes, he did. Well, thank God he spotted that, you know, it wasn't just goody two shoes and that kind of thing. That hopefully there was a little bit more, and he'd certainly developed it and brought it out. But and I'm glad he did. I mean, he went a little far sometimes with the boobs and things like that, but nevertheless, it was always done very tastefully and safely.
And can you talk a little bit about his relationship with Peter Sellers? It lasted for so many years and through so many films.
Well, they were great friends, and they needed each other, and yet they loved and hated each other, depending on both of them, because they were, oh gosh, Blake said about Peter that the hardest thing is to direct a comedy with somebody who is sodden with depression in his real life, and Peter was a great deal of the time. I mean, he was funny and dear, and when he was on, he was really on. But if you're an aficionado that wants to look, as the Panther films continued, Blake managed eventually to make the comedy around Sellers, whereas in the original ones, Shot in the Dark and things like that, Sellers contributed so much to them, but he was so frozen and unable. He was not well, and he had, sadly, heart problems and things like that. But he created the humor for him and then shot it, so it wasn't so hard, because Peter was quite a depressive by the end, and he couldn't have any. Didn't want anybody that wore purple on the set, and, you know, kind of madly superstitious and things like that. But he was also very funny when he was on form.
It's interesting. It's suggesting in the documentary that Blake was using the Panthers, you know, because they were commercially very successful,
right, yeah,
to be able to then make the films he wanted, you know, his most personal film.
Well, and also Hollywood was changing, and I think that he got so disgusted with some of the studio heads who felt they knew how to make a movie and a comedy and all of those things. And they would, decide to cut left, right, and center in the movie. And it drove Blake crazy, and that he didn't have it. It's a long time before you get total control of the product that you're directing, especially if you've been around a lot in the business. But to be told, no, that's not going to work, or that's wrong, or something like that, I think it's disgusting, because if you hire the filmmaker for that very reason, and then sort of pretend that you know much more about it, usually in box office terms. But
yeah, you're very eloquent on when you speak about Wild Rovers. That was
when they took it away from him. Yeah, it was heartbreaking. It's what Wild Rovers, which is that beautiful horse. That's in the movie, isn't it? The horse breaking sequence. Oh, he was so proud of it, and it was so beautifully filmed. And I mean, I still, to this day, again, it's one of those films where I say, how did he think to do that opening shot with the horses tearing across camera, but also pulling back and pulling up? And it was such a thrill, and he was really, really pleased to have made the film and done it. But then the studio heads decided to butcher it left, right, and center. And it really tore Blake's soul apart. And there were nights when he really was desperate to figure out. I think I talk about that moment when do I on the film where he watches Aubrey pass by? Yeah. And he nearly runs somebody down, and that was the very man that had been doing the cutting. And he said it shook him dreadfully, because who would ever have believed him? But it was an accident, and but boy, he pulled up short after that. Yeah.
I'm going to allow for a few questions. If so, raise your hand, and we'll bring you the microphone. This is one right here.
Many thanks to you and all involved for this beautiful documentary on Blake's life and career. My question is, was he working on any kind of manuscript, or did he leave any materials or ideas that you and Emma could turn into a play or a storybook?
You mean in general, did he rely on his manuscripts, or was
he working on anything new?
Something that hasn't been made that you and Emma would like to take on?
Oh, lots. He had so many. He had 6 ideas a week or a day or whatever, and I couldn't keep up with him. And if he said he was going to write something, I would go, oh yeah, and then it would suddenly be 6 weeks later we'd be in production. Particularly with things like That's Life. But he, as he got older, knew more and more what he wanted to write about, and it was interesting to see him evolve. He was, a great deal of the time, and I think I talk about it a little bit, he was a depressive, and he was he was the most charismatic human being I've ever bumped into. And it's no wonder anybody that met him, pretty much, could hardly help but fall in love with him, because he had an inner knowledge, which I discovered as we first met. He would, how could I describe this best for you? He would know, as a new stranger or whatever was walking towards him, he would, in a way, sum that person up and know exactly what their nature, what they were made of, and so on. And I couldn't figure that out. How did he know? But I think he was a sad child, and he must have observed so much. But nevertheless, he pulled it all off.
Well, there is a warmth in this comedy. It's not just the physical.
Yes, it's not necessarily cruel.
Yeah, no, it's not cruel.
Except sometimes Sellers doing the bars when he was, doing his athletics and so on. Honest to God, that very, very, very funny moments. And when they were good, the two of them, they laughed truly, truly laughed. And Blake would be on his knees in front of the camera, saying, "Look what this idiot is doing," and so on. But they did have good times. They did. Question right here.
Not necessarily a question. I just wanted to make a statement, if I can.
Make a statement?
Yes.
Thank you.
I just love the way you explained how creative he was and that he saw the opportunities of working with people that had not created a big movie career yet. And the fact that he was able to work with Henry Mancini and create the music.
Dudley Moore, for instance,
Dudley Moore, just incredible. Yes. And he had a gift.
He had
and
a
how
gift
fortunate
for
we were.
Twisting things on their head or on their end, and he somehow the person that we thought was going to do 10 was not possible when we finally got to shooting, and all of a sudden he just stood on his head about it and looked at the man across the room from him, which was Dudley Moore, and they were in group together, if you please. And he suddenly thought, that's who I want. And then I said to him, slight sidebar here, I said, but Blake, do you still want me in the movie? Because I'm towering above little Dudley. And but of course he said, Julie, it's okay. And I said, but if he's supposed to have been my boyfriend and my lover, what about, is that going to work? Wouldn't you want, do you have to put him on a box beside me or whatever? And he said, think about people like Ava Gardner and Sinatra, or think about people like, let me think if another good example, Andre Previn and his wife, or wives, because he said, what is so attractive about them? And I said, it's here. They're all so damned attractive people, and they know something, and they have a secret somewhere, and their talent is huge. And so he said, imagine look at Ava Gardner and Frank Sinatra. What brought them together? And I guess, obviously, her beauty, but nevertheless, they were attracted because Sinatra was canny and knowing and funny, and he was certainly been around. But obviously, it worked, and it is the unusual ones that you fall in love with quite often.
And I think that in 10 also the size, because your character, she's much also more mature, yes, and evolved and smart, and he's just like a little guy with a midlife crisis.
Bad boy, yeah, bad little boy. Some of the shots in 10 are such a joy. It is, and it was so revolutionary at that time about midlife crisis and all of that, but it was such a well thought out movie and believable, so believable. It wasn't just shtick or being funny or anything like that. I mean,
and a huge success.
A
huge success.
Huge success. Yeah. Yes, it really helped us financially enormously.
There is one. Phil.
Just curious. You may not want to answer this. Is the character in 10, the studio head, supposed to be Jim Aubrey, the one whose finger he bites?
Yes, I think so. Or not 10 so much, but SOB.
SOB, that's what I meant.
That's
SOB.
what you meant, probably. Yeah.
Right.
Well, it was a diatribe against Hollywood, and he had to write it out of his system. He couldn't have.
Yeah, Robert Vaughn was the actor, right?
That's right, and he was so good. Yeah.
So one other question was the Robert Preston doctor, there's so many people like that in
Hollywood, particularly, yes. Dr. Feelgood, in a way.
Is he based on a real person?
Maybe. Our doctor, Blake's and my actual doctor, asked if he could have a role in the movie, of course, as did our lawyer, as did all sorts of other people. And he was very generous about that. But because he was our doctor and he teased him a great deal, he teased the doctor a great deal. When he asked for a role in the movie, he gave him every awful possible role and that you could imagine. And then he just insisted that he had his own trailer on the set, his own dressing room, but he had it decorated in cobwebs and, you know, all kinds of awful things. But
Is the corpse in SOB?
he is the corpse in SOB, yeah. Let him rolling in the waves and left him there at the end of a take sometimes. But with goodwill and all of that. But of course, because our doctor wanted to be in the movie, and he's the gypsy violinist in That's Darling Lily. And oh God, so many funny times like that. But that was Blake too.
That one right there.
Two questions. First, you mentioned Laurel and Hardy at the beginning. I was wondering if there were any other filmmakers, directors.
Well, obviously Buster Keaton, people of that genre. He was very, very fond of and loved their movies and had a big collection of Laurel and Hardy movies. And mostly, yeah, I think he was very influenced by that kind of humor and the fact that it broke some pain barrier if you were slightly depressive. It kind of made you laugh and you felt better. But he was very enamored of that kind of talent.
Did he also love Billy Wilder?
Oh, adored Wilder. Yes, he did. And what did Billy say about Blake? He said Blake received from Billy Wilder a very good and lovely award, the Preston Sturges Award. And Wilder introduced Blake and he said, well, when I saw his films, I said it's shtick, but it's brilliant shtick, or something like that.
And my second question.
Yes.
He was clearly creative in so many ways. Did he ever try his hand at writing fiction or memoir?
At writing a fictional memoir?
Fiction or memoir.
Fiction or memoir.
Not really. What would you say, Em? I would say not really. He was frightened of being pinned, I think, or trapped in some way. It's odd because if we would play games in our house at night with the kids and things like that, but he very seldom participated because he didn't want to be pinned down in any way. It's very interesting. And when we started a movie together, whenever, I noticed eventually, I began to see that he was in knots until he got first, second, or third shot in the can, and then all of a sudden he'd ease up. And it was being judged, watched. He didn't like that. He wanted to just be free with his thoughts and ideas. So I don't know what that answers, but I just thought I'd mention it.
But in a way, you know, that's life is based. You know, it wasn't a script.
It was taken from life too.
Was
Very
taken from
biographical.
life,
Yeah. And he'd been going through a really bad period, and you don't get a glimpse of it really with the documentary because they're showing so many other things. But the stuff that he came up with, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, for the film That's Life, which Emma was also in, and A Joy, which was a gift to us, wasn't it, darling? It was such fun. But he did like a 16-page outline of character and then said, now, it's an experimental film, and I want you to just do what you think your character, based on those 16 pages, would do. And am I right about that? I think I am. And you'd think that all the actors who were great friends and lived in the area and things like that, and we knew them so well, you'd think they'd all be patting their role and puffing themselves up. There was such enormous collaboration on That's Life particularly, and it was wonderful to see that people. I mean, it was experimental, and as was the party also. Mm. Say that again.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, he had his control. What he did was have us all suggest and do and contribute, and then he'd say, "Great, now run that again, but let's cut that, do that." So he, in his mind's eye, not in the camera, he would trim the film and do it and show us what he wanted to keep. It was a smart way of getting a film done quite quickly.
And how was it to Jack Lemmon is essentially playing a character that is very
Blake.
much like Blake.
Yes, yeah. Oh, I think Lemmon was one of Blake's favorite actors. I mean, look at the performance he got out of him in Days of Wine and Roses. And he, I think that they were great, great friends, and all Blake ever said to Jack when we were filming together, and he was the loveliest gentleman you could imagine to film with, he'd say, "Jack," meaning take it down a notch, or not ever puff it up, because Jack was wonderfully, ebullient and everything, but just that. And Blake, Jack would say, "Got it," and he'd give it the way Blake wanted it. Lovely things to observe and watch, really.
Okay, just one right here. No? Okay, right there. Sorry.
Oh, there's somebody way
right there
at the back.
Yeah.
Wait for the microphone.
I've got it. Thank you. I'm curious, because the two of you were clearly so different yet shared this incredible partnership. What were the ways? Obviously, there were ways that outwardly you stepped out of previous types of roles that you had in your time with him, but what were the ways that you felt the most stretched and challenged?
That's a fascinating question.
His influence.
Can you help me with that one, Em? Tell me. Yes, it does. And a lot of them were a slight challenge in that sense, but he didn't just go for the cute image of Mary Poppins or sweet stuff. He wanted, I think he knew that I had a sense of humor, obviously, well, we slept together most of the time, so there you are. But so a good sense of humor was occasionally very necessary. But he made me laugh more than any human being I've ever met. And there were days and nights when he knew that he was teasing me, driving me crazy. And I could not stop laughing sometimes at what he was up to. And he convinced me, after watching a movie with Pavarotti on television, he convinced me that he was one of the world's greatest tenors, that Blake was. And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yes." And we had a long conversation about singing and what it was, and it was so personal and so on. And I said to him, "Well, I think it's giving someone your soul. I think you're saying, 'Here I am,' and you can't see it. You can only feel it. And you can't really take a class as you can with a ballet class and emulate other people. You have to just have a solo lesson as a rule." And so when I heard him one night after the lights went out, and he began to sing this ridiculous little boy voice that drove me nuts, and he was singing "Sweet Lilani, Queen of the Flower." I mean, all the dumbest songs you can imagine, which drove me mad, but made me laugh. And he'd say, "Don't laugh, I'm showing you my soul." And most people don't know that I'm one of the great, great tenors in this world. And I could not stop. I mean, I wept until I fell asleep and felt great the next morning. But then there were many other times when he employed the same gimmick because he knew it would make me laugh.
I think we have time for one. No, it's up there because it's the last one. Yeah.
Hello, thank you. My question is I noticed some consistencies or some similarities between the actors Jack Lemmon and I guess Dudley Moore and Peter Sellers and the Depression. Did he Blake Edwards? Was it a way of him
Was depressive at times, big time, and especially as he got older, his mortality, I think, bothered him dreadfully, and he tried so hard in so many ways to avoid the depression, but I think he very much feared losing it, losing his talent, dying, all of those things, but he somehow employed them as well. He used the things that bothered him the most and turned them into something interesting. I don't know where he would have ended up, Giulia, because he did, dip and change in so many, many ways. There was no genre that I don't think he could conquer, and I think he conquered them all. Musicals, comedies, dramas.
And I think that wonderful absurdism that's in his comedies, it's really the absurdism of life. There is that combination of pain and laughter that is really
that Sellers never quit. Yeah, in terms of giving up.
I mean, never. So there are so many human touches in the characters and in the films and in the filmmaking. Sam has made your grandchild.
He sounds at me.
No, he's basically saying we're done. And
as you probably gathered, that mate of mine, I could go on for hours about, but he set me about my ears. He made me think. He made me, and he did really, in a very flattering way, trust what I wanted for him, because I wanted him to just let it all out. I think you think so too. Yeah,
Thank you.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you
so much.
Thanks for asking good questions.